Hello, and welcome to Sustainable Outlook, a podcast from global law firm K&L Gates, where we discuss the transactions, technologies, and trends in the sustainable economy. We hope you enjoy this discussion. Please reach out with suggested topics or guests, or questions about how we can work together to create a sustainable economy.
Thanks for joining us today, Jennifer. Really pleased to have you here. And to kick things off, could you please tell us a little bit about why now is the right time in the maritime industry to focus on sustainability and equity?
Well, it's actually always the right time to focus on sustainability and equity, but now it seems the lens is finally being focused on sectors where there is much work to be done. The maritime industry has been focused on sustainability in a lot of different ways, and Washington State especially has been a leader in some of the best practices for stewardship and protection of our marine ecosystems. But it is a critical time in the industry right now to focus specifically on decarbonization for vessels and the associated shoreside infrastructure. More than 3% of global CO2 emissions can be attributed to ocean-going ships, and the industry and their associated emissions continue to grow rapidly. And that's an amount comparable to major carbon-emitting countries. In fact, if global shipping were a country, it would be the sixth largest producer of greenhouse gas emissions. Decarbonization can be especially challenging for the deep sea segment. They generate 70 to 80% of the global fleet CO2 emissions. But we can't ignore the nearly 30% that comes from inland and coastal vessel emissions. And those emissions typically impact our nearshore communities, also creating environmental justice issues. But shipping is facing increasing pressure to decarbonize its operations and reduce emissions to air. The main challenge over the next decade is to accelerate our decarbonization pathway. Alternative carbon neutral fuels, such as hydrogen and others, are essential for achieving the International Maritime Organization greenhouse gas emission reduction goals for 2050. And the only practical way for shipping to achieve its ultimate vision of full decarbonization is possible before the end of the century. Just last month, mandatory measures to cut carbon emissions of international shipping have been adopted by the International Maritime Organization, setting a course to meet greenhouse gas emission reduction targets for the industry. And on equity, we have a lot of work to do to diversify the maritime workforce. This is true for race, gender, and even age. According to the International Maritime Organization, women represent just 2% of the world's 1.2 million seafarers. And also, the industry is facing a silver tsunami with an aging workforce that needs to be backfilled.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize about the age issue within the maritime industry. You would think, they're good jobs, right? Potentially anyway. You would think people would be eager to take them. Jennifer, you've spent a lot of time doing a lot of different things, most recently with D&B as a consultant, particularly in maritime and renewables. But you recently joined Washington Maritime Blue, which is a really great organization here in Washington that's focused very closely on the maritime industry and the maritime economy. What role is Washington Maritime Blue taking in the industry, and specifically in regard to sustainability and equity?
Well, when we started on this path for Washington Maritime Blue, it actually started as development of the state strategy for the blue economy. We started by gathering stakeholders from across the maritime industry, but also other industries as well, from energy to digital sector, for public, private, across the quadruple helix of different types of organizations, all coming together to help develop the strategy. And that really built a great foundation of trust and of understanding what some of the challenges and opportunities are. And when we delivered the strategy document to the governor, we then launched the Washington Maritime Blue organization, which follows a cluster model of bringing together across this quadruple helix of organizational types to focus on the triple bottom line for the blue economy. So specifically on equity, as part of that process of developing the state strategy, we included a report on workforce sustainability in the maritime industry. And it analyzes and breaks down the percent of race in each subsector of the maritime industry, as well as gender. The key points that we learned from this analysis, which was some great work done by Teresa Arbo, a University of Washington grad student at the time, is that we really need to have a recognizable story. We need to be able to see ourselves and our pathway to be able to find the jobs in the maritime industry. We also have entry barriers that prevent equitable access to the industry, as well as internal dynamics of the maritime culture that impact the retention of the workforce. So to address this, one of the programs that Washington Maritime Blue has is the Youth Maritime Collaborative. We are providing internships with a focus on youth and communities of color. And in addition, we provide equity training for the companies that are hosting the interns. Also, we have a Washington Maritime Blue Innovation Accelerator that's hosted at the Port of Seattle. And this last cohort of founders, as we like to call them, included several women. And the Port of Seattle did a great article recently, really featuring those women founders, what some of the struggles that they've had in one, recognizing the opportunities in the maritime sector, but also some of the challenges of the startup community and what they're experiencing now that they have moved forward with their startups. So I encourage you to check out that article if you get the opportunity. But these are just a few of the things we're doing on the equity side. On sustainability, we have a lot of work that we're doing specifically around decarbonization, as well as focusing on quiet sound program for whale detection and reporting, as well as reducing underwater noise.
A lot of these programs that you all are doing, I mean, they're all wonderful and so forth, but I'm sure they're probably detractors. After all, the maritime industry, as you noted, there are a lot of stakeholders in the industry. Some of them may not like this. You focus on joint innovations and strategic partnerships, though. Your role really is to try to bring people together. But who are you working with to advance these goals? And how are you working with people, particularly those who maybe are not as focused on sustainability as you or Washington Maritime Blue are?
Well, I mentioned that the process really started with a stakeholder process, right? We developed this strategy by and for the stakeholders. And I think that coming together of the community in a way that was not in a regulatory environment, it wasn't in a policy setting, it was an open environment where we could come together and talk about challenges, but really with a focus on solutions. What kind of projects could we work on together that would help each other? And that was kind of the foundation for our joint innovation project model. There are different global models of joint innovation, joint development, joint industry projects. DNV leads quite a few globally. But we wanted to come together with our Washington stakeholders and include some global stakeholders as well to really advance some innovation ideas that could help both with sustainability, but also with competitive advantage. That we were, by being first entrants in the market, you can also really have a great competitive advantage. So sometimes it's the economics that's the driver, sometimes it's the environment, and the best case scenario, it's all of the above. But some of the projects that we're working on right now, one is the zero emission fast foil ferry. It's truly a cross-cutting public-private partnership. On the public side, we have the support of 3 different ports: Anacortes, Bellingham, and Skagit County. We have Kitsap Transit and Tacoma Public Utilities. And on the private side, Gloston Beaker Design Team is working to advance their electric hydrofoil passenger ferry design. Washington Maritime Blue is coordinating the Joint Innovation Project, and DNV is providing management and technical support. But the program brings together the partners and works through feasibility and demonstration phases in succession. But the key is that we're also working on parallel paths so that we can actually accelerate the process and advance from concept to preliminary design. And the aim is to get to contract design for vessel demonstration. So we're looking at different routes. We're looking at shoreside charging infrastructure requirements, the permitting regulatory pathways, as well as economic environmental impacts. So by addressing all of these different aspects and bringing all the different types of partners together, we can work to accelerate the project, find hybrid models of funding that include public and private dollars, and work to get this vessel built and bring back the vision for Washington Puget Sound of the Mosquito Fleet, with getting more ferries that are buzzing across our Puget Sound and getting cars off the road. Another project I'll mention is our Tacoma Green Hydrogen Project, another public-private consortium. This is a proposal to demonstrate hydrogen generation and use for port and maritime applications. The plan is to utilize Tacoma Power's green energy, which is primarily from hydropower and 97% carbon free, for electrolysis to produce and use hydrogen. In addition, Tacoma Power has a shore power rate, and they just rolled out the first in the nation renewable electrofuel tariff to encourage hydrogen production. So our partners here in this case, OCO Inc. is a company that has technology to store hydrogen in the form of formic acid. DNV and Pacific Northwest National Lab have technology that enables the generation of formic acid as a liquid hydrogen carrier for safer storage and transport. And the application we're doing is a 1 megawatt mobile cold ironing or shore power system that the vessels can plug into while they're at berth. By having it mobile, this actually saves the utility the cost of installing substations at every berth. So again, this systematic approach that we're taking brings together technology kind of at different stages of scale, but really tries to demonstrate what can be done with formic acid as a liquid hydrogen carrier, as a potential maritime future fuel, as well as what can be done for providing shore power now with a mobile fuel cell unit. So that's another example where we're bringing together a lot of different public-private partners. And in that case, we're still looking for the funding to implement this project.
Labor and unions and organized labor are very strong in the maritime industry still. You haven't mentioned them at all. How are you all engaging with organized labor?
Well, in the strategy development process, we definitely had labor involvement and engagement, including being part of the governor's advisory council that was appointed. We also really wanted to focus on the future of work and how to ensure that we have the training that's necessary to enable where the industry is going in different aspects so that our labor community can be part of and enable what's happening.
Well, Washington has a lot of strengths in maritime, which you definitely pointed out. It's just one jurisdiction in a global industry. How do you bring the rest of the world along to reach these goals?
Like working with the stakeholders, for me, it's all about connecting the dots. And there fortunately are a lot of other examples of coalitions and cluster organizations around the world that Maritime Blue, one, look to model themselves after, as well as now new ones that are starting up that are looking to Maritime Blue as a model. It's not a question of competition among these coalitions, but really connecting the dots and finding ways we can collaborate among our members and working to accomplish shared visions. So, for example, in Norway, Innovation Norway has been a key partner, and the state actually signed an MOU with Innovation Norway for collaboration on decarbonization issues. And they led several delegation trips to Norway for Washington Maritime Blue and several Washington stakeholders to see what they have been doing in Norway with some of their cluster models. And then eventually, in addition, Washington Maritime Blue signed an MOU with the NCE Maritime Clean Tech Cluster in Bergen to be able to share some of the different best practices that we're doing and ideas on joint innovation projects. Just a few weeks ago, the Blue Sky Maritime Coalition just launched. Blue Sky Maritime Coalition is focused on both U.S. and Canada, North American waterborne transportation. So really looking at coastal, inland, harbor craft, and working to decarbonize across these sectors. So Blue Sky's modeled as well off of Maritime Blue, but it's a collection of maritime industry leaders that really are focused on decarbonization for regional and inland shipping. Getting to Zero Coalition focuses on global shipping operations that account for the 70% of emissions I mentioned. And Getting to Zero and Washington Maritime Blue are both members of the Blue Sky Maritime Coalition and reciprocal members in each other's organizations. So for Washington Maritime Blue, being engaged with these other organizations allows us to collaborate, bring forward innovative concepts, and help us accelerate our mutual organizational goals. So I think this coalition and cluster model that enables the collaboration across sectors, across our silos, is really what's going to help us accelerate our pathway to decarbonization.
That's really informative and enlightening about how the organizations are supporting each other across the world towards a common goal of decarbonization. Now, just to wrap things up, sustainability is a really broad topic. We've talked quite a bit about sustainability and equity. Thank you for your insights there. What do you think we will all be talking about in regard to sustainability in the maritime industry in 3 years?
Well, I mentioned decarbonization quite often, and there's a lot of conversation right now about what do the future fuels look like? How do we get these vessels deployed? How do we get the infrastructure there? I hope 3 years from now, we see that the vessels are deployed, that we have infrastructure in place. We'll be looking at several demonstration vessels for hydrogen and other alternative fuels. We won't be calling them future fuels, I hope, anymore. We'll be seeing them in place. Battery and hybrid electric operations are already happening in force. Washington State Ferries has declared that they're going to be all electric going forward for their entire fleet. So we'll see the retrofit vessels that are being worked on now and some of the new builds that will be on Washington waters 3 years from now, and paving the way for what other ferry operators can do. But then ferry really is a great demonstration segment to show where you can go in other vessels. So we'll see more tugs, we'll see more harbor craft that are moving in the direction of electric, hydrogen, and other alternative fuels. But we really have to accelerate that pathway. We need to get these vessels on the water and demonstrate it, and really working with the ports and our utilities to get that infrastructure for being able to have the charging, for being able to have the fueling, so that we have the certainty that we need for those vessels to be able to deploy. And it's also a competitive situation where if you don't have that right fueling infrastructure and zero emission alternative fuels available, the industry may be going to other locations where that is available. So the U.S. does have a bit of catch up to do in this space. I'd say on the global front, they're definitely more advanced in some of the areas that we're going. But I think with these new collaborations launching, the new joint innovation projects, the fact that the U.S. government is starting to turn some attention to the maritime space and looking at some investments on the public side that really need to be made, both on the manufacturing front, on the alternative fuels, on the port side, and on infrastructure that are really going to get us in an accelerated path in 3 years from now, so that we really are moving towards our targets and where we need to be for decarbonization of the industry.
Well, thanks so much, Jennifer. That was all really interesting. Thank you for taking time to talk with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainable Outlook. To listen to past episodes and receive notices for new episodes, subscribe by searching Hub Talks, that's HUB Talks, in your favorite podcast app. We hope you will tune in next time to learn more about the outlook of the burgeoning sustainable economy.